Among the three forms of Santi, peace, Tadanga Santi is among the most important relative to the other two, because it is the work portion, it is the worker part of these three. If Tadanga Santi is complete, then Sammuti Santi is automatically included, and Achanta Santi, which is the final end of the defilements, final full peace, is automatically gained. We don't have to do anything special to make it arise. So Sayadaw would like the yogis to understand that Tadanga Santi is very important. And this is why he is speaking in detail about it, explaining this is what is said theoretically in the text, and this is how it actually occurs in the practice. So some yogis may think, oh, same thing again today. However, something which is profound needs to be said again and again. And it needs to be said in different ways so that people can understand it. So today, Sayadaw will speak again about Tadanga Santi. Tadanga Santi is a combination of three words, Ta and Anga and Santi. And the basic meaning is Santi, which means calm, and it also means peaceful. So first, there needs to be calm, stillness, and only then can there be peace. Achanta Santi is that which goes beyond all things that are bad. It eliminates all of these. And when one reaches this peace, called Achanta Santi, for the first time, then one overcomes the possibility to have any low rebirth. There will be no rebirth in the lower realms. And at most, one will have 7 more human and deva lifetimes. So when one realizes Achanta Santi for the second time, then Kama Raga, which is the desire to experience good sights, to enjoy good sounds, good smells, good tastes, good touch, good thoughts. The desire for these is weakened a lot, and also the tendency to be angry, resentful, and so on, called vyavara. This is also weakened. So at the second stage of realizing Achanta Santi, then our interest in sense pleasures is very much weakened, and so is the tendency to get angry. At the third stage of realizing Achanta Santi, then no matter how delightful something is, there won't be any desire for it. No desire will arise, no wanting. And no matter how unpleasant or disgusting or hateful an object may be, no anger will arise. The tendency to anger is completely gone. And the tendency to have any desire for sense objects is cut off. So because of the cutting off of this kama raga, this form of raga, then there will be no more rebirth as a human or as a deva. when one dies, one will go to the Brahma world. And within the Brahma world, too, where one goes will be a very, very clean place. So finally, the final realization of Achanta Santi overcomes all the potential for new life. It overcomes all the remaining bad things and overcomes all the things which can cause new life. And this is the highest, according to the teaching of the Buddha. The Buddha himself sought this, and in Pali this is said to be Brahmacharya Pariyosana, the end of the holy life, the end of the practice. This is Arahata Pala, the fruition, Arahata fruition. And at this stage, all things which can cause rebirth are completely destroyed. So this is Achanta Santi. And to get there we have to have Tadanga Santi. That is our basis for getting to Achanta Santi. Without this basis of Tadanga Santi, then there's no way Achanta Santi can be realized. We can't gain this ultimate peace just by doing dana, by being generous, or by doing service, or by developing the jhanas, not by doing this alone. Samadhi alone will not gain us this ultimate peace. With sila as our base, we develop the factors of virya, sati, and samadhi. And we develop vipassana knowledge in stages. Only when vipassana knowledge matures will one reach Achanta Santi, this final peace. So for those who really want to be free of the suffering of existence, this is the goal. And to reach this, one needs to follow the forerunner path, the path of practice that we do now, that leads to this end. So Sayadaw does not know whether this is the goal which the yogis have established or not, but this is the end of the path, this firm peace, this lasting peace of Achanta Santi. And every day, day by day, the amount of effort that we make in a single day is significant. It's a huge amount of effort, day by day, that we are doing. And if we were to calculate this, it's cause to make us all feel very happy. So we are working for a truly indestructible happiness. And one should be happy. One should make oneself happy by thinking this. The agitation of raga, lust, of dosa, anger, of moha, delusion, is sometimes gentle. Sometimes it's moderate. And sometimes it's out of control. It's violent. And when it reaches that stage, one can no longer control one's speech and one's body. And therefore one transgresses. And then hiri and ottappa, moral shame and moral fear, can't stand up. They don't have a chance. And there's also no ability to put oneself in another person's position. That consideration for others is overwhelmed. And transgressions, violence, is bound to occur. So when extreme anger goes out of control, then one commits acts such as torturing, killing, and so on. And out of envy, one works to harm others. and one deceives others in order to harm them. When lust or raga is extreme, when it reaches the final maximum, then one does things like take things that belong to others, or take other people's daughters, take their wives, and abuse them. And then one lies for one's own benefit. So without knowledge of how to evaluate whether an action is beneficial or not, whether an action is suitable or not, one turns to taking drugs. And therefore, in the world, lobha, greed, dosa, anger, and moha, delusion, are occurring in a totally out of control. So when that is the case, then transgressions arise, are done, and these harm others and oneself also. So both sides suffer from transgressions. Because of immorality, the world is being destroyed. No type of bomb can do as much damage as immorality. And the destruction of the world, which has already started, is due to immorality. Everyone has an enemy within them, an enemy which can cause us to go to a low life. And this is an internal enemy. External enemies exist too. They're things like the weather, other people, or some types of animals which can harm humans, like tigers, lions. However, these are far away from us, and they don't happen very often. We don't encounter them often at all. But this internal enemy, which was called in Pali Vaira, this internal enemy is something we face every second of the time. And this enemy is very violent. It, to the extent that one cannot gain control over this enemy, it makes us inhuman. It makes us so that we no longer have a human mental attitude, a human heart. And it makes us so that we do not have human knowledge. It keeps us from being able to make our lives better. It stops us from being human, from having a good heart, and from developing better than average human knowledge. This enemy is within all of us. So how to overcome this enemy? Most people don't think about this. Scientists develop ever new weapons. And this is something that people are fascinated with, weaponry. If we keep putting fuel on the fire, it will never go out. Today the world is on fire. There is fire in every being. And most people have no protection against this fire. In the time of the Buddha, there was a young Brahmin, a hermit, who, this was about 2,500 years ago, this young Brahmin hermit was learned, and he knew the Vedas, and he knew about the jhanas, and he went to the Buddha and asked a question. he didn't ask about fire. What he asked about was water. He said that there are streams that are flowing throughout the world. Sometimes they're gentle, sometimes they're rough. How can we weaken them, these streams? How can we cut them off? So this was a young person who really knew how to ask questions. So with the investigation that is done by science of today as far as weaponry goes, there's no end to the destruction that can happen. So, and what we experience in the world now is almost like being carried away by a flood. And one needs to, but doesn't. People don't basically search for a method to slow this flood down. They don't search for beings who can help them in this task. However, this young hermit of the Buddha's time, he was able to think about things very clearly. And he said that kilesas are like a stream. They flow everywhere in the world, flowing everywhere through the human world. So this is what he thought. The kilesas are like a stream. And he said, how can we weaken the flow of these kilesas, these streams that are flowing everywhere? So, and what is it that can cut off the stream completely? So for beings, kilesas flow like a stream through one's life, whether one life or many lifetimes. They've been flowing for a long, long time. And when one just lets them flow, then there's no moral shame, no moral fear, and no ability to think about how others feel. So in that case, when lobha is extreme, when greed is extreme, one gives in to it. And there's no thought about what is just. And the same thing happens when our anger becomes extreme, or our delusion. So because of extreme lobha, then one is not satisfied with what one has. And one turns to sexual misconduct, one turns to stealing, lying. So there needs to be, people need to find a suitable way to weaken this stream of the kilesas and finally to cut the streams off. So the first part of what the young Brahmin said was his feeling. How he saw things was that kilesas are just flowing like streams without a break everywhere in the world. And so his two questions were, what is the way to weaken this stream, these streams, and what is the way to cut these streams off completely? In the advanced countries of today, injustice is widespread, and the production of weapons is also happens quite a lot. So Sayadaw asked, what are these streams and where are they flowing? So they flow everywhere. They flow in the human world, in the animal world. They flow all over. And what is obvious is that they flow every time when they're seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. These two when we say that they are, kilesas are flowing everywhere in the world, one meaning of world is this world of our sense experiences. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. This is also called world, loka. And most people do not have sati. So they are not able to withstand the objects that come their way because of lacking sati. And also, encountering objects, then there's also thoughts, reflections, beliefs that arise because one doesn't view one's experience with sati. And Sayadaw spoke about these beliefs that come to be. The belief that there is a soul, an individual soul in each being, and belief in the Supreme Being. So the belief that there is jiva atta, the individual soul, and this is what enables us to see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and think. And this jiva atta, individual soul, is ruled by the Supreme Being, Parama Atta. And when that Supreme Being commands, we live. When the Supreme Being decides that we've had enough, then we die. He calls back the soul to him. So starting with this belief in Atta, there are 62 views that arise in the world. And this too is a stream that flows everywhere, this stream of views. And following this, there's wanting good things to hear, see, smell, taste, touch, and think. So wanting is also like a stream, this thirsty, hungry craving. This too flows like a stream in the world. And following that, there's dissatisfaction, anger, dosa, flowing everywhere because of meeting up with objects that aren't to our liking. And mana, pride, thinking highly of ourselves, envy, jealousy, wavering about the true Dhamma, the mind that is scattered for no reason at all, scattered on its own. So from here, one goes to not being able to see the faults of misdeeds, and not seeing them, then one is ignorant about misdeeds. Ignorant. So moha or avijja flows like a large stream, a torrent in the world. So these are flowing all over, and beings have no place of safety. Sayadaw said that the answer is apamada, first of all, apamada. This means this means to avoid the things that should be avoided, and to undertake the things that should be done. Knowing, first of all, one needs to know what things are not good to do, say, or think. Those things are to be avoided. And one must also know what it's good to do, to say, to think. Those things should be done. So first of all, one has to be able to distinguish between these two categories of things, what is to be avoided and what is to be undertaken. And then one can't neglect or forget to avoid the things that should be avoided. One has to be vigilant about this. And also, among the things that need to be done, one should do them without neglecting them. Each has their own place, each of the things that needs to be done. And doing them in their own place is something that we can't neglect or forget. So this is, first of all, what we need to do. We need to know, we need to be able to evaluate, first of all, what is it that is beneficial to do, to say, to think or plan? What is and what isn't? What is it that is suitable to do, to think, to say, and what isn't? So one needs to search for a way. One needs to think about, well, what is it to be a human? What is being human? What does it mean to have a human heart, a human mentality? What does it mean to have better than human knowledge? So one has to search for a method by which one can be truly human, with a human mentality and better than human knowledge. One has to know what actions are those, what actions, speech, and mental attitudes are those which harm oneself and others. And what are those actions, speech, and mental behavior which benefit us, which are gentle and which are helpful. So first one has to understand this, and then one needs to avoid those which are harmful, those deeds, speech, and thoughts which are harmful. And one has to work to bring about those things which are beneficial. One has to work to perform, to develop these wholesome physical, verbal, and mental behavior. And this is done with sati. When we don't have sati, this is pamada, when we neglect to avoid that which should be avoided, and when we neglect doing that which should be done, this is pamada. When we neglect to avoid those misdeeds that should be avoided, then we harm others. And when we neglect to do the things which are beneficial, then we don't get any good result. So not avoiding the bad things, we get bad results. Not doing the good things, we don't get good results. And thus, this is a real waste. When people behave like this, it's just useless. So, one knows that when we avoid bad food that is bad for us, then we avoid the bad result that comes with eating the bad food. But in addition to this, what do we need to do? So we also need to have the element of doing the things which are beneficial. So appamada is not neglecting in either of these areas, not neglecting to avoid what needs to be avoided, not neglecting to do and develop what needs to be done. Pamada is living without sati, being careless and neglecting these areas, whereas appamada is living with sati. Sati is very important. People who do not have moral shame or moral fear, hiri and ottappa, they won't do anything to make themselves good. They won't say anything to make themselves good. They won't think anything to make themselves good. And they won't have any ability to think about how others feel. So if that is so, then one will perform acts that are misdeeds, and one will no longer be a true human. One won't have a human mentality, and one won't develop better than average human knowledge. So one will be basically an animal in human form. When one has moral shame and moral fear, hiri and ottappa, one will then control oneself so that one doesn't make oneself dirty and foul. One won't do misdeeds because of one's regard for oneself. And one will also be able to have the ability to be considerate and think about how others feel. So when one avoids the things that need to be avoided, then one will not be considered a bad person. And others too gain relief because one doesn't commit misdeeds. So if this is when one doesn't avoid what needs to be avoided, the environment is harmed and we ourselves are harmed too. So one can see that this neglecting to avoid what needs to be avoided, neglecting to do what needs to be done, is the path of stupidity. This is the path that stupid people follow. And appamada, on the other hand, not neglecting to avoid, not neglect to what needs to be avoided, not neglecting to do what needs to be done, being diligent and vigilant, is a path of helping others as well as benefiting oneself. This path of appamada is very important in the world. So Sayadaw said, well, with what do we cut off this stream of kilesas that are flowing everywhere? With what do we weaken it? With what do we cut it off? Sayadaw plans to talk about this tomorrow. Today, what he has shown is how kilesas flow like streams everywhere in the world. And the method for weakening the flow is that which the yogis are practicing now. This is the method for weakening the flow and for cutting it off. So Sayadaw has been explaining about this in terms of theory and practice in accordance with what the Buddha said. And he is going to go into detail about this tomorrow. That's all for today. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.